Welcome inside the War Room. I'm your host, Andrew Valancourt, and we're back today for episode 80 of the Dynasty War Room podcast. On today's show, we're going to talk about some players to trade away. So I've got a list of guys at each position that I think are worthwhile players to sell, to trade away, explore, see what your options are on the trade market. And so we're going to go through that list of players. And before we do that, I want to remind everyone, as always, to make sure you are following this podcast on your platform of choice. We're in everything out there, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, you name it, we're there. So go make sure you're following along so you don't miss any future shows. And find us on social media, We're on Twitter or X at Dynasty War Room. You can find our Facebook page as well, our YouTube channel, which is at Dynasty War Room. And happy to interact, answer any questions, and follow back on those channels. And one more thing, go find Fast Draft in the App Store, download it, put in $50, use code WARROOM, and you're going to get that $50 fully matched by Fast Draft. It's a new best ball app. It's awesome. Highly recommend you go check it out. You can explore all sorts of different contests that they have going on. And if you use my code WARROOM, you get a full deposit match once you deposit that and play through a contest on the app. So go check that out. And before we launch into the players to trade away, just want to give a brief show update. I know we missed a week, so I apologize for that. Was sick, unfortunately, so didn't quite have the voice to be able to record a show. And then this week, here we are a day late, a little bit of a hectic week at work. For those who don't know, I am an attorney in my real-life job, so it's been a little bit crazy, and enjoyed some playoff baseball today here in Detroit, so, backed up the schedule a little bit. So here we are, though, getting this episode about players to trade away out to you all, and this is going to be focused more for the teams that are not currently in a playoff position, whether you are a tanking team or a team that's in the middle of the pack that things just haven't quite gone your way. Or even if you are, in the 5th or 6th spot in your league standings in a 12-team league, and you have a shot at making the playoffs, but you just don't feel that confident about it. You think it's more of a fluke, and you're more worried about, building up your team for next year and years beyond. This is the show that is going to apply to those people. If you're a true contender, it's going to apply a little bit less. However, there might still be moves with these players that you can make depending on your situation. So it doesn't not apply to contenders. It's just going to be more helpful to those teams that are probably stuck in the middle of the pack or are off to a disappointing start to the season. We're going to have an episode coming up where we get into players to buy that will be much more focused on this year and contenders in Dynasty. But this is going to be for the teams that are having a bit of a rough start to the season. And so let's kick things off at the quarterback position. I've got 2 QBs, 3 running backs, 3 receivers, and 2 tight ends to give us 10 players in total, along with what I'm calling the obvious names at each position that we don't need to go in depth on, because it is pretty clear that if you're a rebuilding team and you have some of these veterans on your team, you should be moving them regardless of situation. But let's talk about the players that are not so obvious. And I'm going to kick things off with Carolina Panthers quarterback Bryce Young. He's only 24.2 years old, the number 1 overall pick a couple years ago. And you might think to yourself, well, isn't this the type of guy that rebuilding teams should be holding on to or, banking on for the future? And I guess for me, this comes down to one simple thing, and that's I just don't think Bryce Young is that good at football. It pains me to say it. I have him in a league. I drafted him high in a rookie draft, and I'm just not a believer. I just don't feel encouraged by what I've seen from him. He finished last year very strong. It really helped push his dynasty value back up, and that's maintaining a bit this year despite kind of the rough beginning to the season, particularly from a fantasy perspective. Carolina's been okay in terms of where they are in the standings, but I'm just not super optimistic that he's the long-term answer. And so for me, when you're looking at quarterbacks in Dynasty, it's almost less about the upside of a player as it is what's their long-term outlook in the NFL. Are they going to lock down a starting role? Because you want the guys in Dynasty, in Superflex especially, that you know are going to be there for a handful of years, and you're not going to have to go back to the rookies every single rookie draft to try to replace them. You can get away with that at other positions. Running back, you can have veteran players, and then you just draft new ones every year as a rookie. Quarterback, you can't really do that. You need your guys to stick long term, and I just don't see that happening with Bryce Young, at least not at this point in time. It certainly doesn't help that he doesn't have a high ceiling from a fantasy aspect. He's best case scenario a QB2, and while certainly QB2s are of course valuable in Dynasty leagues and Dynasty Superflex leagues, I'm just not sold. I think you can still get enough for him right now that you can either target another quarterback, or you can get a first-round pick still for him because of the value of the position in a Superflex league. And I think, this year there should be a number of quarterbacks coming out that I would probably rather have than Bryce Young. I think if you can get a 2027 first-round pick, I would prefer that to a 2026. And I think that goes, just in general, the 2027 draft class is supposed to be very good. The 26 class, some mixed reviews. I think it remains to be seen kind of what the strength of the class is really going to be. We need that college season to continue to play out. But Bryce Young is just a player that I would be looking to pivot. So whether it's someone of equivalent value, if you're just looking to maintain a more long-term QB option, you could probably swing Bryce Young into somebody like a Jared Goff. I would certainly be looking to do that. And if you're looking to find someone younger, you can use him to tier up. If you have a collection of picks because you've been rebuilding, you can use Bryce Young and a set of picks, whether it's a first to go up and get, a more elite younger player, whether that be, one of those other second-year quarterbacks like a Bo Nix. Drake May, you've probably missed the boat. I think that his value is really going to start to skyrocket. You'd probably need a solid amount more on top of Bryce Young in just the first. But you get the idea in terms of that tier up to a more stable option. And so Bryce Young, I'm out, and he's the first guy on this list. Now, Justin Fields is the second quarterback on this list, and he's 26.6 years old. He's actually off to a pretty good fantasy start. He did, suffer the injury and he missed a game, but when he's played a full game, he's been very good for fantasy. He's been pretty much exactly what we expected in that regard. However, the downside for Justin Fields is that we just don't know long-term if he's going to be a starter in the NFL. The Jets are off to a very bad start, have not won a game, and despite Fields looking adequate, he's on a short-term contract. It's just one of those things where there is no long-term stability. You're not locked into a bigger contract. He is not with the team that drafted him in the first round. This is very much, bridge quarterback type situation. And so this is a perfect opportunity where you can milk the quarterback market in a Superflex league from a contender. I think you absolutely can be getting a first-round pick for Fields, given that he can lock into a lineup as a starter regardless of team. And so, he is young, and that might feel bad to trade him away as a rebuilding team or a team that maybe isn't even a true rebuilding team, but just one that is missing the playoffs, or at least the outlook is not great. But he is the type of player that you can turn into immediate value, get a first-round pick, or, again, you can explore the options of maneuvering around to a more steady, stable, long-term option. Although with Fields, given that he does at least give you that high week-to-week ceiling, that's where I think targeting draft capital is probably going to make more sense. Whereas, Bryce Young, you can swap to sort of a more equivalent player, but still get what in my eyes would be a much more solid option to have long-term. So Justin Fields, a guy that if you're a retooling or rebuilding team, I think makes a lot of sense to trade away. Now, the three more obvious names that I just want to briefly mention, because if you are a rebuilder, a true rebuilder, but even a team that's just missing the playoffs, I think Matthew Stafford, Geno Smith, and Aaron Rodgers are three names that you should essentially be trying to move and get whatever you can. In some leagues, that'll be a second-round pick. Some leagues, it might be more like a third. It really just depends on the circumstances of the contenders in your league, whether they need quarterbacks, that sort of thing. But, Stafford, I think, probably is worth the most of those three. He's playing the best. He probably has the most time left in the NFL. Rodgers, of course, probably in his final year, maybe one more. And then Geno Smith probably has a few more years, but really, really struggling this year with the Raiders. And, you're probably not going to get anybody that's too excited to pay up for him. So those are the three obvious names to move on from at the quarterback position if you're a rebuilding team. All right, so switching gears to the running back position. And my three names here, I'm going to start with J.K. Dobbins, Denver running back. And he is 26.8 years old. He's off to a very good start to the season. He's been the clear-cut number one starter for the Broncos. And if you're a rebuilding team, this is one of those situations, I think, where you can take advantage of the opportunity where he's been the starter. He's got some pretty significant value, I think, at this point in time. Probably to the point where you could get a late first or an early second from a contending team that needs a running back. I think the injury history here, of course, is scary, and RJ Harvey is there in Denver that will presumably at some point take over that backfield. He's getting a little bit more involved. It's been a bit slower, I think, than anticipated, but again, part of that's due to Dobbins playing so well. So if you're a team that's going to miss the playoffs, you probably want to unload Dobbins now while you can get maximum value. And if you can find the right contender, I think you might be able to talk them into a late first. It's just one of those situations where, again, you got to see what the conditions are in your league, see who needs a running back, that sort of thing. And if you can't get a first, because some people might feel that that's a bit steep, that's where you can come in and try to offer some other draft capital to make that first happen, or see if you can get a little bit more on top of a second to make that happen. I wouldn't be moving him for a late second. I'd be late first, early second, or equivalent type of player. But J.K. Dobbins, I think, fits the mold of a guy that the future is just very much a question mark, as it always seems to be for Dobbins. And so if you are not going to be competing for a title this year, I think Dobbins is a guy to move off of now, while there's interest in him on the trade market. Next up is Chicago Bears running back DeAndre Swift. He's 26.7 years old. He's actually been a fairly solid fantasy runner this year. He's been a productive starter. You can have him in your lineup. He's the clear workhorse back in Chicago. But he makes this list for a couple reasons. One, he hasn't been terribly efficient. So while he's getting a large volume of work, I just don't know that he is necessarily that good of a running back at this point in his career. So he struggled a bit with that. I think he may be better suited to be in more of a complementary type of situation. And so I think because of that, it is very likely that Chicago adds a running back, whether it be through the draft or free agency next year. I just think there's going to be some form of competition for Swift as Ben Johnson and company enter year two. So while Swift is the workhorse, again, similar situation to Dobbins. In fact, all three names on this list, I think, are in that late first, early second type of situation in terms of what you should try to get in a trade. And so Swift, he's still young enough that a team acquiring him is going to get a few usable years, at least in some sort of role. But if you're a team that is trying to, retool, regroup for the future, if this year is going to be his most impactful year moving forward, you might as well move on now, get max value, and then use whatever assets you get in return to be able to build your team for 2026. Chuba Hubbard is the third and final running back name on this list. He's 26.3. He's a bit banged up right now, which of course affects this. But he's a player that I would be looking to move off of if I was a non-playoff team, especially if I was a rebuilder. He is someone that Carolina's offense is questionable at best. He's been a solid player. In fact, for a long time, he was a bit underrated, but I do worry about the future here. Rico Dowdle had a really nice week. There's still Jonathan Brooks that eventually is going to be back from injury and was an early draft pick. But again, Carolina could go out, sign somebody, draft somebody, which I think is more likely. And if the offense just continues to be mediocre with Bryce Young, I just don't know that you're ever going to get, elite production from him. And not that that's what the cost is, but it's just something where I don't know that he's a building block. I don't think he's a player that if you are a middle of the pack or worse team, you're looking at him going, this is a dude I'm going to have for the next 3 years. He's locked into my starting lineup. I just think it's a situation where monitor his health. You probably don't want to trade him right this minute while he's not playing, but when the news comes back that he's going to be ready to go, I think that is your opportunity to make a trade, because at that point, again, there's probably going to be some more running back attrition throughout the league, and he's still a good, solid runner. He's been a productive fantasy player, and so I think he's just another one of those guys that he's solid production that isn't going to cost an arm and a leg for a contender to go get. So I think, again, you can, that late first, assuming it's the contender's own picks, or if they have an early second, or they're able to do something comparable to get to that range. I think that is the target for Hubbard as well. Now, the three names at the running back position that I think are the obvious names, I have Aaron Jones, Derrick Henry, and Alvin Kamara. And Alvin Kamara and Derrick Henry have been good, great elite running backs, but they're in their 30s. The teams are very much struggling this year. Baltimore's defense is terrible. Lamar Jackson is hurt. Alvin Kamara and, the Saints are in the running for the first overall pick. And then Aaron Jones, banged up right now. He's going to come back from IR at some point soon. And similar to Hubbard, when Jones comes back and is healthy, you should be looking to move him for essentially whatever you can get if you're a non-playoff team. Alvin Kamara, I think, is the guy that is, if you're a rebuilding team again, he's someone that you should for sure be moving, that I still think you can get some solid value for. And Henry is the one that's probably the most difficult to trade from this list, simply because he is still an elite running back. And if you're a team that can bounce back into consideration next year, you'd probably want to just hold on for the ride. Given the struggles, you might not get quite as much as you'd like. But it's one of those situations, again, where if you're a true rebuilder, you're bottom of the league, you're tanking, you got to get this guy off your roster. I'd be looking to get a late first-round pick for him as well. Again, early second, if not, I think it's a pretty suitable range because he's one of those guys that you're going to get elite production in theory the rest of the year. But the age is not, of something that would necessarily reflect for a first round pick. So, depends on who's in your league, what the desperation level might be, or the need, for some of those contending teams. But I would be looking to move all three of those players if you're a rebuilding team. All right, so let's talk about a couple wide receivers here. And the wide receiver position is always a little bit tough, I think, when it comes to rebuilding and trading away, because they last longer than other positions outside of, high-level quarterbacks. You can have a wide receiver in your dynasty team for 8 to 10 years and have solid, steady production at some level, like pretty much all the way along the way. And the first guy on this list is A.J. Brown. He is a guy that at 28.2 years old, he still has time to be a good, productive fantasy asset. But the passing volume doesn't seem like it's going to increase for Philadelphia. It's been low. They're winning games. They don't really need to throw the ball more. And of course, that's been extremely frustrating for A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, who I think you could almost put on this list as well. But A.J. Brown, I think, is the bigger name. He's probably the player you're going to get more for in a trade. I think he's still a very talented player. I think he's going to give you those spike weeks. I don't think he's a bad player or a bad player to have in your lineup. But if you are a rebuilder or a middle-of-the-pack team, which there's a decent chance that if you've been starting A.J. Brown every week and you've been disappointed, you might be struggling. And so this could be a situation that you're facing where, is it time to move on? And I think it is a good opportunity to do that if you're a team that, is not a contender this year and, being realistic about your chances for 2026, things aren't looking that great. I think now is a good time to move on because he's still got, a couple years where fantasy managers are going to be expecting production, and you can still get a first-round pick. I think you can get a first-round plus for A.J. Brown, first and a second, first and a player, something along those lines I think is about right. And if he struggles the rest of the year and then he's going into his age 29 season, you're going to start to enter a window, where you might not be able to get the first that you think he's worth and that his name would indicate he's worth. So it's a very difficult time, I think, if you're an A.J. Brown manager. I acquired him in a league a couple weeks ago where I'm a contender. I truthfully don't know how excited I am that I did that. It's kind of one of those moves where I knew that I was going to get a lot of bad with the good. But I have a really good team. I had CeeDee Lamb. I needed to make a move to add someone to my lineup. And you might have guys like that in your league too. Good, solid lineups that they have an injury or, they're one piece short. And if they're a contender with a late first, they're probably going to be willing to move that pick in what is a subpar draft, or supposedly going to be a subpar draft. It's a little early to really know. But I think 2027, that draft class is really where the excitement is. So again, we mentioned this earlier. If you can get a 2027 first-round pick plus a mid-round pick this year for A.J. Brown, I think that's a move you can make as a rebuilding team, and you'll probably come away happy that you did that. The next guy on the list is DJ Moore, Chicago Bears wide receiver, 28.4 years old, and I've been a big DJ Moore fan for a long time. I think he's a very good wide receiver. I think he's a great possession guy. He can get those. He's a deep threat, but he's also somebody that you can work with in the screen game, short yardage situations. And he's been the number one target for Chicago for a number of years now, but not anymore. It is Rome Odunze. I think that is very obvious. And Luther Burden is starting to get a little bit more playing time. Colston Loveland was just drafted in the first round. And this is a spot where I think DJ Moore has very quickly gone from, the top dog to being someone that you're just going to be very unhappy with in fantasy, or at least not feel comfortable starting every week, because I think he's going to be more of one of those fringy, team wide receiver twos where you're going to get some spike weeks and you're going to get some production, but he's not the wide receiver one that he's been for fantasy before, or even the top 24 type of guy, and maybe not even top 36. I mean, this is someone that is clearly not the focal point of the offense like he was last year and in years prior. So he's still young enough, and he's still a big enough name, and he's still catching enough passes that I think you can get some solid value for him in a trade. I think this is probably more in line with some of those running backs where you're talking about a late first, early second type of situation, which is going to feel really bad if you don't get a first in a trade for him. But I don't know what you can expect from him moving forward. I have a ton of shares of DJ Moore, and on contending teams, I'm just going to ride it out. He's a usable asset. And even if I'm not starting him every week, it's somebody that you can plug in on the bye weeks as they start to come up and whatnot. But I'm very nervous about his position, and I would be looking to move on if I was a non-playoff team. And the final wide receiver is Jerry Jeudy of the Cleveland Browns. He's the youngest of these three at 26.4 years old, and he's the clear number one receiver in Cleveland, but the offense for the Browns is so poor. The quarterback play has been rough, although Dylan Gabriel looked solid in his first career start. But this offense runs through the running game with Quinshon Judkins and then the tight ends. So Harold Fannin Jr. has really come onto the scene as a rookie. David Njoku is still there. And Jerry Jeudy, he had the flash last year where he was awesome, but that has not been the case this year. He's definitely struggled. and I just don't see the path to consistency. I think he's stuck in one of these you feel like you need to play him, but then he hurts you type of situations. And so if you can swing a trade to get either an equivalent type of player or more than likely you're going to be looking for draft picks. I think this is an early second round pick type of range. Again, I don't think you're really going to get a first for Jerry Jeudy. You can certainly try, but maybe if you package him with someone else, that's where that could be a possibility. But I think a second round pick is probably more in line with what you can get for Jeudy right now. And if you're a rebuilding team or a non-playoff team, I think that could be a good move to make. I just don't know that he is a building block, someone that you necessarily can count on to be in your lineup every week moving forward. Now, I can understand if there's some hesitation given the age, if you're more of one of those true middle of the pack, one of those 6-7 type of teams. But I don't know if you're 8th or below or something like that. I just don't know that he's going to be valuable enough to your team moving forward. So if you can get something that you're happy with in a trade, Jerry Jeudy would be somebody that I would send on his way. Now, the three obvious names that I have picked out at the wide receiver position are going to be some aging veterans: Mike Evans, Cooper Kupp, Keenan Allen. These are guys that are all giving you some level of steady production this year. Mike Evans, of course, is hurt right now, so he's not doing that, but was and probably will give you some good production later in the season when he returns. But these are all guys, they're getting deeper into their 30s. If you're a rebuilding team or a non-playoff team, you should be moving these guys for essentially whatever you can get. I think from a name value standpoint, you might be surprised about what you can get. I think you can probably get a second-round pick for these names, at least for Evans, maybe even Keenan Allen, given that he has been very, very involved with the Chargers this year in their offense. Cooper Kupp, I don't know if you're going to be able to get a second. You can certainly try, maybe a late second, but at this point, I think you're just trying to get a collection of picks, whatever will make you feel good, because I just don't think they're going to give you any value the rest of the season if you're clearly not a playoff team. And their status for 2026 is entirely up in question. I think all three could retire. All three could play one more year. Maybe you get a third year out of some of these guys, but I just... I'm not sure that you're going to get that far with any of these names. I think you're probably looking at the end, at least from a fantasy relevance standpoint for these guys after this season. And so I'd be looking to move on. All right, now the tight ends. I have two players at the tight end position, and the first is the tight end 1 on the season, and that's Dallas Cowboys tight end Jake Ferguson. He's 26.7 years old, and he has been unbelievably good. He's getting double-digit targets. He's scoring touchdowns. He's catching a ton of passes. I mean, this is everything you could hope for from a tight end. So chances are, if you have Ferguson, your team is doing well. You're probably in the playoffs. However, if you're a non-playoff team or you're rebuilding and you just had him stuck on your roster because you couldn't move him in the offseason, well, now is your big chance because you can absolutely get a first-round pick for him right now. The production is incredible. I would certainly expect it to continue the rest of the season. Dallas is going to be one of those teams that is in a lot of shootouts because they have such a bad defense, and Ferguson clearly has Dak Prescott's trust. So he's young enough. He's got the production, and I think you can get a nice little haul in return because look, tight end production this year has been pretty difficult to find. And so Ferguson and that kind of locked-in production that you're getting right now, I think you can get a lot back in a trade. And it's possible that his targets have been inflated with CeeDee Lamb out. So while that game log looks nice and awesome, could just be a good time to move on. See what you can get, put him on the block. And because this is not a player that I'm expecting to just be like the number 1 or 2 tight end on a yearly basis moving forward. I very much think this is kind of a 1-year deal where things are just aligning for him. But I'm not expecting him to be in the conversation with the Trey McBrides and Brock Bowers and Sam Laportas of the world. And obviously some of those names have... Sam Laporta, I don't know if he's necessarily like a tight end 1 overall type of guy anymore. He obviously finished that way as a rookie, but Bowers and McBride are a tier above everyone, and despite Ferguson's incredible production this year that would put him in that category, I don't think he's someone that is a threat to stay there long term. And so because of that, again, I think you're selling at a high point. If you are already a non-playoff, non-contending, or rebuilding team, this is a great way to kickstart a rebuild and get enough to where you can feel good about your chances of adding, quality players to your lineup for 2026 that are going to be younger. The next name is David Njoku, and he's the final player on this list, and the second tight end. He's 29.2 years old. We just talked about him a little bit with the Cleveland Browns offense and Jerry Jeudy, but David Njoku it's a tough situation because he's still a very good player. He's been producing to a decent standpoint for fantasy. He hasn't been incredible, but it's clear that he is losing some work to Harold Fannin Jr., who has been awesome as a rookie. I think things are trending to where Fannin is likely the full-time guy next year for Cleveland. And so David Njoku, you're probably looking at him in a different environment next year, different team. Who knows what that could look like? He'll be entering his 30s. He still has the name value. He still has enough production that I think you can get, again, we're probably talking early second for him, but who knows? Depending on the needs, again, you never know what you might be able to land in a trade, whether it's a late first-round pick or a quality player at another position, but he's still a big name, and there are a lot of people that will trade more for the big name. A.J. Brown is somebody that you might get more than you even think you can simply because he's a huge name. David Njoku, not quite to that level, but he's been a long time quality option at the tight end position. So you might be surprised what you could get. And if you're not a playoff team or a rebuilder, both from an age standpoint and then a situation standpoint, now is a good time to move off of him and see what you can get back in return. Now, the three obvious names that I have for the tight end position, a bunch of veterans that are in their mid-30s, and that's Zach Ertz, Darren Waller, and Travis Kelce. All three who have been pretty solid players. Zach Ertz has struggled a bit of late, but Darren Waller has come on very strong lately in Miami. Travis Kelce has been steady as usual, albeit not to the number one overall at the position level, but still a quality weekly start for the Chiefs. And I think if you're a contender, this would be a piece of news for you, and that would be in reverse. I think these are guys that you could go get. Kelce and Waller in particular, I think are probably going to be very helpful to teams down the stretch. And so rebuilding teams absolutely should be moving on from these guys given the age and the unpredictability for 2026. But if you're a contender, this could be a good window of opportunity for you to go acquire some of these guys while you can get them for what will probably be relatively affordable. I don't think it's going to cost a second-round pick to get somebody like an Ertz or a Waller. Kelce might because of the name value, but Waller and Ertz I think you can probably get for a third-round pick, and in some situations even less. It really just depends on the situation, but if you're a rebuilding team, again, you're just going to try to get what you can because their futures are not guaranteed. You're not promised good production from any of those guys in 2026 because all three could choose to retire. And so, again, you're just moving to get something. You want those draft picks, get a younger player to give your team some hope for the future. But you don't want to be stuck with those guys expiring if you're not a playoff team. So that's why Ertz, Waller, and Kelce are the obvious names to know. All right, so there we have it. There are 10 players to trade away if you are a rebuilding or non-playoff team. Bryce Young, Justin Fields, J.K. Dobbins, DeAndre Swift, Chuba Hubbard, A.J. Brown, DJ Moore, Jerry Jeudy, Jake Ferguson, and David Njoku. Thank you all very much for tuning in. I appreciate it. We'll be back with a episode about players to buy next week. Fingers crossed. There is a jury trial going on in my work life, so hopefully that doesn't interfere with the podcast schedule, but I will post updates on the Twitter page when I know more. So fingers crossed on all of that. I appreciate you all listening and making it this far in the show, and we will talk to you all next week.